Her husband mocked her at every dinner, but one business meeting changed everything. Cassandra stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her blue silk dress. It was Nathan's birthday, and she had spent the entire day preparing, cooking his favorite meal, decorating the dining room, even ironing his shirts perfectly, though he hadn't asked. The candles flickered gently over the dinner table, but the clock ticked past 9, and he still hadn't come home. When he finally walked in, reeking of expensive cologne and stale wine, he barely glanced at her. "You didn't have to wait," he muttered before heading straight to the shower. "No gifts, no thank you, no acknowledgement." Cassandra extinguished the candles in silence, her hands trembling slightly. The next morning, she woke up early as usual, made his coffee, and placed his briefcase by the door. Nathan didn't say good morning. Instead, he glanced at her robe, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Maybe try looking like a human being before noon. It's embarrassing when the neighbors see you like this." Cassandra swallowed the hurt like she always did. She didn't cry, not anymore. She had learned that tears only gave him more to mock. After he left, she stood motionless in the doorway for a long time, staring into the emptiness of the house. It was as if she had become a ghost in her own life. Nathan loved gatherings where he could shine. At dinner parties, he became louder, bolder, especially when Cassandra was near. One evening, surrounded by colleagues and their spouses, he raised his glass and joked, "Some women marry up, and some just marry out of boredom. Guess which one Cassie is." Laughter followed, though a few guests shifted uncomfortably. Cassandra, mortified, forced a smile. Her cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Later, when she confronted him gently in private, he scoffed, "Oh come on, lighten up. It was just a joke. Everyone knows you don't have a job." That night, she lay awake in bed, her eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling. She had once been passionate about finance, eager to work in wealth management. But life happened. Marriage happened. Children. She remembered turning down an interview after their daughter was born because Nathan said, "What's the point? I make enough for both of us." He repeated often that she didn't earn anything, so she shouldn't have a say in decisions. The bank account bore both their names, but the control was all his. And the message was clear: she existed under his roof, at his mercy, not as an equal. One afternoon, while Cassandra was folding laundry, her teenage daughter Savannah barged in, upset over a disagreement. When Cassandra tried to explain something gently, Savannah snapped, "What would you know? You don't even work." The words pierced deeper than Cassandra expected. It wasn't just the anger, it was the echo. Those weren't Savannah's words. They were Nathan's, fed to her, repeated now with the same sharp disdain. Cassandra stood frozen, a crumpled shirt in her hands, watching her daughter storm off without a second thought. Later that evening, she overheard Nathan laughing with Savannah in the kitchen. "She takes everything so seriously. I swear, sometimes I wonder how she ever survived college." "Oh, wait." Savannah giggled. Cassandra turned away, walking into the darkened living room. She didn't sit. She stood still, as if trying to keep herself from disappearing altogether. The girl she once was, confident, ambitious, was now just a faint whisper under the noise of this house. But somewhere, something began to stir inside her. A quiet voice that hadn't spoken in years. That night, Cassandra opened the drawer of her nightstand and took out an old notebook. The cover was faded, the pages slightly yellowed. She hadn't written in it for a long time. But now, she began again. At the top, she wrote, "Things he says." Then line by line, she began to list the phrases Nathan used to belittle her. Not to expose him. Not to seek revenge. But to remember. To stop doubting her own memory. To confirm that what she felt wasn't fiction, it was lived. She needed proof for herself, written in her own hand. The next morning, she stood in front of her closet for longer than usual. She pulled out an old blazer she hadn't worn in over a decade. It still fit, though slightly tighter at the shoulders. She buttoned it up, held her chin high, and walked downstairs. Nathan glanced at her, amused. Interviewing for a PTA president role, he smirked. Cassandra said nothing. Her fingers touched the inside pocket of the blazer, where she had slipped a copy of her resume, updated secretly the night before. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do, but she knew this: she was no longer content with being erased. 2 weeks later, while dusting Nathan's office at home, Cassandra opened a drawer to organize some loose papers. Among the clutter of invoices and memos, she found her own resume, one she had printed and revised years ago when she had first thought of returning to the workforce. It was untouched, unread, tossed among receipts. Seeing it there, disregarded like an old receipt, lit a spark. That evening, she stayed up late, looking up online finance courses, watching videos, and reading case studies on her tablet. Her eyes stung from the screen light, but she felt awake for the first time in months. She began a new routine. Every night after Nathan went to sleep, she studied quietly in the guest room with the door closed. By the end of each week, she had completed another module, solved more complex problems, and started following business blogs again. She didn't tell anyone. It was her secret world, untouched by Nathan's cynicism. And the more she learned, the more confident she became. It wasn't just about getting a job anymore. It was about reclaiming the parts of herself she had allowed to rest in silence. For the first time in years, she felt a quiet purpose growing inside her. It happened on a rainy Thursday. Cassandra had brought Nathan's forgotten lunch to his office downtown. She entered the firm's sleek lobby, clearly out of place among the suits and polished heels. As she handed the bag to the receptionist, one of the senior partners, Mr. Ellison, passed by. He paused, noticing her calm demeanor and poised presence. "You're Mr. Walker's wife, right? I recall you studied finance?" She nodded, unsure whether to feel proud or ashamed. "I did. A long time ago." He smiled. "We're piloting a part-time internship program for returning professionals. You might consider applying." Back at home, Cassandra debated for days. Nathan hadn't mentioned the encounter, though she suspected he heard about it. She finally filled out the application one night, heart racing with every word typed. The email was brief, respectful, and direct. She clicked send before she could lose courage. Within 3 days, she was invited to an interview. Her hands shook as she reread the message. It was surreal. After so long being defined only by her roles at home, someone had seen her as a capable individual again. The interview was short and professional. Mr. Ellison sat across from her, asking thoughtful questions not about her gap in employment, but about her insights into current financial trends. Cassandra surprised even herself with how naturally the conversation flowed. She left the office with cheeks flushed, not from nerves, but pride. 2 days later, she received the call. The internship was hers. It wasn't high-paying, but it was real. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. "Thank you," she whispered, voice tight with emotion. She waited until dinner to tell Nathan. As expected, his reaction was dismissive. You're actually doing this? An internship? At your age? He chuckled, shaking his head. Well, at least it'll give you something to do between grocery runs. Cassandra stared at her plate. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Something had changed inside her, his words no longer pierced as they once did. They bounced off the armor she was quietly building, forged in silence and resilience. On her first morning, Cassandra dressed with care. She chose a conservative navy blouse and dark gray slacks. As she reached for her old leather portfolio, Nathan stood at the doorway watching. Going to play businesswoman now? He scoffed. Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning after your big day. Cassandra exhaled slowly, then walked past him without a word. Her silence was not surrender, it was strength. In the mirror elevator of the firm, she saw not a wife, not a mother, but a woman reclaiming her space. At the office, she was assigned to a corner desk in the operations department. Most employees regarded her with polite indifference, though a few eyed her curiously, the boss's wife, playing assistant. Still, she listened carefully, asked questions, and took detailed notes. Her movements were measured, her attention sharp. Every day she stayed late, double-checking data and absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Beneath her calm surface, something fierce had awakened. She wasn't here to prove herself to Nathan, she was here for herself. The first weeks were difficult. Cassandra constantly fought the feeling of not belonging. She struggled with new software and terminology that had evolved during her years away. But her determination was relentless. She woke early to review spreadsheets, watched tutorials on weekends, and sought mentorship without shame. Slowly, the numbers began to make sense again. Her instincts, once dulled, now returned with clarity. She solved a minor discrepancy in a vendor report, nothing dramatic, but enough to earn a nod from a team member. Every night, she came home exhausted but invigorated. Savannah noticed the change. "You look different," her daughter remarked. Cassandra smiled faintly. "Just tired," she replied, though deep inside, she knew it was more than fatigue. It was the beginning of rediscovery. And while Nathan still rolled his eyes at her efforts, Cassandra no longer internalized his scorn. Each day she survived in that office, she built a layer of quiet, undeniable strength. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Cassandra noticed the inconsistency. She had been reviewing a quarterly report, cross-referencing supplier costs with invoices from earlier that year. A small discrepancy caught her attention, barely noticeable unless someone was looking closely. She flagged it, recalculated, then dug deeper. Within an hour, she uncovered a chain of miscalculations that could lead to a six-figure loss. Her pulse quickened. She double-checked everything, then sent her findings to Mr. Ellison with a note that began, "Apologies if I've misunderstood, but..." By the next morning, her inbox had a reply from Mr. Ellison requesting a meeting. Cassandra walked into the conference room with her notes and a quiet, focused expression. She explained her findings, careful not to overstate. When she finished, he leaned back, silent for a moment, then said, "Good eye, Mrs. Walker. You caught something most of our junior analysts missed." Cassandra nodded once. Later, she would allow herself the smallest smile. She was no longer just a presence in the room, she had become a contributor. And though Nathan would never admit it, she was becoming something he could no longer define. When Mr. Ellison presented Cassandra's discovery at the next staff meeting, he credited her by name. "Mrs. Walker, our newest intern, flagged a discrepancy that could have cost us dearly," he said, nodding in her direction. Heads turned toward her, some surprised, others skeptical. Cassandra remained composed, offering only a polite smile. Nathan was present at the back of the room. He didn't clap. He didn't even blink. But Cassandra noticed how his jaw tightened, just slightly. Back at home, Nathan poured himself a drink and said nothing about the meeting. Cassandra didn't bring it up either. The silence between them had shifted, less out of resignation now, more out of quiet power. For the first time in years, she felt no need to explain herself. She wasn't seeking his approval anymore. She had earned something more valuable than that, professional respect. And though Nathan pretended otherwise, she could see it in his posture. He had noticed. That evening, as they sat at the dinner table with Savannah scrolling through her phone, Cassandra looked at her husband and saw not a figure of dominance, but a man suddenly unsure of his footing. Nathan barely touched his food. His usual sarcastic remarks didn't come. Instead, there was a heavy silence, one that Cassandra didn't rush to fill. She ate slowly, calmly, and cleared her own plate without waiting for anyone else. Later that night, as she read reports in bed, Nathan entered the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "So, you're the office hero now?" he said, half laughing. Cassandra didn't look up. "I just did what I was trained to do." He scoffed and walked into the bathroom, slamming the door. She marked a sentence with her pen and kept reading. Something inside him had shifted. And she wasn't afraid of it anymore. A week later, Cassandra was asked to join a client-facing audit preparation. It was unexpected. Interns rarely engaged directly with clients, but one executive insisted on her presence. "She's thorough," he told Ellison. "She sees what others overlook." Cassandra prepared meticulously, rehearsing every figure, every forecast. The day of the meeting, she wore a tailored navy dress and minimal jewelry. She entered the boardroom with steady steps and a silent vow, not to shrink. During the audit, she answered questions confidently, even correcting a senior associate, gently but decisively. The client was impressed. Afterward, in the hallway, Cassandra overheard the client speaking to Ellison. "She's sharp. I'd like her to oversee our next quarterly review." Cassandra paused briefly, absorbing those words. Back at her desk, she didn't smile or celebrate. She simply opened her laptop and returned to her work. There was still more to build. When the team returned from the audit, Mr. Ellison called Cassandra aside. "You'll need a quieter space," he said, walking her down a hall to a small glass office. It wasn't large, but it was hers, desk, chair, and her name printed discreetly outside. Cassandra ran her fingers along the edge of the desk. She had never had her own office. Even at home, she had always worked in corners and shared spaces. That evening, she came home to find Nathan in the kitchen, on the phone. "Yes, she's still playing the intern. I give it 2 more weeks," he laughed. Cassandra stood in the doorway without announcing herself. Nathan turned, startled. "Didn't hear you come in," he said, hanging up quickly. She simply nodded and walked past him. She had heard enough to feel insulted, but not enough to feel wounded. She was beyond that now. At the office, Cassandra kept her journal tucked in a drawer beneath spreadsheets and manuals. She no longer needed it to remind herself of the cruel words or emotional bruises; those had become distant echoes. But on weekends, she sometimes reread the earliest pages. "You don't earn, so don't decide. Why are you talking?" No one asked. It was like reading the story of someone else's life, someone who had been taught to shrink. Then, one Saturday morning, she came home to find her journal moved from its usual place. Slightly ajar, its bookmark out of place. Her heart skipped. Savannah was out with friends. Nathan was home. Cassandra stared at the journal, wondering how much he had read. She said nothing. If he had seen those pages, he now knew what she had chronicled. But there was no confrontation. Just tension. Nathan avoided her eyes all evening. Cassandra, meanwhile, began writing again, with a steadier hand than ever before. The tension between Nathan and Cassandra grew quieter but heavier, like a storm stalled over calm waters. One afternoon, Mr. Ellison requested a private meeting with Nathan. It wasn't unusual, Nathan was still a senior executive, but this meeting took a different tone. "I want to ask you something," Ellison began. "Do you realize your wife has become one of our most valuable assets?" Nathan scoffed, brushing off the comment with a half-laugh. But Ellison didn't back down. "We've been watching her. The way she solves problems, leads with humility, and earns trust? That's leadership material." Nathan's face hardened. "She's just an intern," he muttered. "A convenient one." Ellison leaned in. "You don't see her. But we do. And we're not going to let your personal insecurities block her growth." Nathan left that meeting rattled. Cassandra never asked about it. She didn't need to. A week later, the announcement arrived abruptly. During a Friday morning meeting, Mr. Ellison addressed the room. Effective immediately, Nathan Walker will be stepping away from his role on the executive board. The room went still. Cassandra froze, her pen hovering above her notepad. Ellison continued smoothly, "We thank him for his contributions and will begin the transition process today." Nathan, standing near the back, didn't speak. He simply walked out. Cassandra didn't follow him. She stayed seated, her heart pounding, unsure if this was relief, guilt, or vindication. After the meeting, she remained at her desk, sorting through reports as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, the moment echoed through her. He had fallen, not because she pushed, but because he stood too long on pride alone. And now, for the first time in years, the shadow that followed her had thinned. That evening, Cassandra was called into Ellison's office once more. The mood was calm, but deliberate. "I won't sugarcoat it," he began. "We need new leadership in operations. Someone the team trusts. Someone precise, thoughtful. I want you to take the interim director of operations position." Cassandra blinked. "Me?" He smiled. "Yes, you. You've earned it. Not through your name, but through your work." She hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready." Ellison leaned forward. "You're more than ready. We wouldn't be offering if you weren't." Cassandra nodded slowly. That night, sitting at the dining table alone with her notes, she thought of the years she'd spent being spoken over, dismissed, ignored. She took a deep breath, wrote a brief acceptance email, and hit send. For the first time, she had stepped into a room without asking permission. When Cassandra told Nathan about her new role, he didn't congratulate her. He stared at her as though looking at a stranger. "So, now you're the boss," he muttered. "I suppose I should be scared." Cassandra didn't react. "I just wanted you to know. That's all." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're better than me now?" She paused. "No. I just don't think you're better than me either. That sentence seemed to hang in the air longer than either expected. Nathan turned away, opening the refrigerator and slamming it shut without taking anything out. Cassandra remained standing, calm, composed, untouched by his tantrum. She had nothing left to prove to him. Her worth was no longer his to determine. And that reality was something Nathan couldn't seem to process. The next morning, Cassandra stood before her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair back into a neat bun. She looked at herself carefully, not searching for flaws, but recognizing herself. The woman staring back was not broken, nor defeated. She looked sharper, stronger, more alive. Cassandra changed into a tailored suit she had bought quietly weeks earlier and slid on simple earrings that gleamed subtly in the light. Savannah, walking by the room, paused in the doorway. "You look different," she said. Cassandra turned, smiling softly. "I feel different." Her daughter tilted her head. "I think I like it." Cassandra's smile grew. The reflection in the mirror wasn't just of a woman stepping into a new job, it was of a woman stepping back into herself, piece by piece, with nothing but dignity and time as her foundation. 2 weeks into her new role, Cassandra received a formal invitation to the company's annual gala, an elegant event typically reserved for senior leadership and major clients. She read the email twice, unsure if it had truly been addressed to her. It had. "You've earned your place at that table," Mr. Ellison told her when she inquired. "You're not just attending, you'll be presenting our upcoming operational strategy." That night, she stood in her closet, sorting through the few formal dresses she owned. None seemed quite right. With quiet determination, she visited a boutique the next day and chose a sleek emerald green gown. It wasn't flashy, just powerful. She didn't tell Nathan about the gala. She didn't need his permission. This was no longer his narrative to approve or deny. Cassandra was writing her own story now. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, crystal chandeliers, and the hum of careful conversations. Cassandra entered alone, head held high, her steps slow and deliberate. People turned, some curious, others surprised. She greeted executives, shook hands with clients, and took her seat near the stage. Just as the evening's speeches began, a familiar figure entered through the far doors, Nathan. He hadn't been invited, yet there he was, weaving through the crowd with a forced grin. He approached her table and leaned in slightly. "You clean up well," he whispered. Cassandra didn't flinch. "This seat is taken," she said calmly, motioning for an usher. Nathan hesitated but eventually stepped away, lingering at the back of the room, watching from the shadows like a man who had once owned the stage and now didn't recognize the spotlight's glow. When it was time for Cassandra to present, the room quieted. She stood at the podium, her voice steady as she outlined the new strategy she and her team had crafted. She spoke with clarity, with certainty, her data airtight, her delivery confident. She didn't need theatrics, her poise was enough. Executives nodded. Clients whispered praise. Even the head of finance leaned in, impressed. As she concluded, the audience broke into applause. Cassandra returned to her seat, heart pounding, but her face serene. She glanced toward the back of the room. Nathan had turned away, slipping out quietly. She felt nothing as she watched him leave. No anger. No triumph. Just closure. It was a quiet victory, the kind that reshapes not the room, but the person standing in it. The next morning, Savannah sat across from her mother at breakfast. There was something different in her eyes, less skepticism, more curiosity. "Everyone at school's talking about you," she said. "Mr. Lawson's dad works at your company. He said you owned the room last night." Cassandra smiled, sipping her coffee. "It was just a presentation." Savannah shook her head slowly. "No, it was something else." Later that day, Savannah followed her into the home office. "Can I come to work with you during the next school break? I want to see what it's like." Cassandra looked at her daughter for a long moment. "Of course you can." In that moment, something deeper than approval passed between them. It was recognition. Savannah wasn't just seeing her mother differently, she was starting to see what strength looked like. 3 days after the gala, Nathan sat at the kitchen table waiting for Cassandra to come home. When she entered, he stood awkwardly. "Listen, I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "I wasn't fair to you. I said a lot of things I shouldn't have." Cassandra didn't interrupt. She waited. "Maybe I was threatened. You've become someone I don't even recognize." She nodded slowly. "You mean someone you can't control anymore?" Nathan stiffened. "I didn't mean it that way." Cassandra stepped past him, setting her bag down. "I appreciate the attempt, Nathan. But your apology isn't something I need. Not anymore." She walked into the other room, leaving him standing in the kitchen, half-finished words falling from his lips like dust from a forgotten shelf. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, Cassandra found a handwritten note on her desk at the office. It was from Olivia, a junior analyst who had recently joined the firm. "You probably don't remember me," it began, "but I sat in the back during your first presentation. You inspired me to stop shrinking in meetings. Today I asked a question in front of the entire team. Thank you for showing what quiet strength looks like." Cassandra folded the letter gently, her eyes lingering on the last line. She had spent so many years silenced, she never imagined her voice could give courage to someone else. That evening, as she walked through the firm's glass doors under the fading sunset, she realized she wasn't just rebuilding herself, she was becoming a reflection for others. Her story was no longer just survival. It was a beacon. At the next leadership retreat, Mr. Ellison pulled Cassandra aside during a break. The room overlooked a lake, the water calm and reflective. "We've decided," he said. "You've proven yourself again and again, not just to the team, but to our board. We want you to join the company as a full partner." Cassandra froze, the words taking a moment to settle in. Partner. A title she had never dared to dream of. She inhaled slowly, absorbing the weight of what he offered. "I accept," she said, her voice steady. "But only if I can start a mentorship initiative, especially for women returning to the workforce." Ellison smiled. "That's exactly why we want you." Cassandra nodded. She had climbed her way back from invisibility, not to sit at the top alone, but to pull others forward with her. That weekend, Cassandra opened her old journal for the last time. She flipped past the pages filled with pain, gaslighting, humiliation. She didn't need to reread them. They had already served their purpose. On the final page, she wrote in careful print, "He told me I wasn't enough. I believed it, until I remembered who I was." She closed the journal and placed it into a small wooden box. With quiet grace, she locked the box and slid it onto the top shelf of her closet. It wasn't denial, it was closure. She no longer needed proof of what she'd survived. Her life now spoke for itself. The chapters of her future would be written in boardrooms, mentoring circles, and dinner tables where her voice would never again be silenced. And this time, she would hold the pen. The company hosted a formal reception for Cassandra's promotion. But she had one request: no red carpets, no lavish speeches. Instead, she asked that the event honor women who had returned to their careers after stepping away. The ballroom was filled with laughter, shared stories, and quiet tears. Cassandra stood at the podium, her speech short and sincere. Sometimes, we don't rise because we're given a hand up, we rise because we decided to stop stepping aside. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, it was warm, personal, sincere. As she stepped down, Savannah came to her side, holding her hand. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Cassandra smiled. "I'm proud of both of us." That night, the reflection in the mirror wasn't just a successful woman, it was a mother, a leader, a survivor, and a builder of others. The room didn't define her. She defined the room. On a crisp Monday morning, Cassandra sat in front of the computer reviewing paperwork. Among the stack was a name change form. Quietly, she filled in her maiden name. It wasn't an act of rebellion, it was restoration. She signed it calmly, sealing the chapter of who she had been told to be. Her email signature changed that same hour. No more hyphen, no more shared identity with a man who had once dimmed her light. As she left the office that evening, her assistant stopped her. "You have a visitor." It was Savannah, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought maybe you could show me how you plan those meetings," she said. Cassandra smiled. "Let's start tomorrow morning." The door closed behind them as they walked down the hallway together. 2 women, 2 generations, moving forward, not because they had to, but because they chose to.